It's Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources into health and career services and financial literacy. But more importantly, this podcast is all about athletes transition out of sport. We interview former college professional athletes and we talk about their journey, their transition ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. And the whole idea is to teach and inspire athletes that there is, in fact, life after sport. So excited today to have Brad Ring. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you,
I'm
Rob?
doing great, thanks. So Brad was a soccer player growing up, and we might hear about some other sports too, but he played college at Indiana University, and then he spent 9 years playing professional soccer in the USL and then also the MLS. And from there, he did some coaching, or still does coaching. He set up the Players Association for the USL, so got real involved in a lot of things, but ultimately getting into sales and business development. And today he's a senior VP of sales for Onrise, which is a very exciting company that we want to hear more about, especially in this space of helping athletes and some of the challenges they have from a mental health standpoint. So we'll talk more about that later. But Brad, let's start off and talk about playing sports growing up. How did that shape you leading up into college?
Yeah, you mentioned soccer. That was always been a big part of my life. But I was the kid that played baseball and basketball and flag football, 1 year tackle football, golf. So I was just super active, doing all sorts of different things. And I love that aspect of it. I love the community that sports builds as well. Many of my best friends to this day are people that I played soccer with or different sports with. So it was a big part of kind of who I was and my identity as a youth player. And then things got a little bit more serious, right, into kind of the high school and then college and then professional landscape as I kind of made my way through that process. But yeah, youth sports was a big part of who I was and who I am, to be quite honest.
Now, was there a dream early on to be a professional athlete? Was it soccer or was it maybe like one of the other sports?
Yeah, there was. I was the kid, in second grade in my journal, writing, I want to be a professional soccer player when I grow up. So I was that crazy kid with the big dream and didn't really know how realistic it was, but knew that I loved playing. I practiced a lot throughout my youth and high school, college years to try to pursue that dream. And obviously it came to fruition, which is awesome and something that I'm grateful for. I know the ball bounced my way a couple times probably in life that enabled that to happen. But it also, stemmed from a lot of hard work and dedication on my side of things. But yeah, always a lifelong kind of goal and dream of mine. The funny thing is then not to jump all the way towards transition out of it, right? But like as a kid, you have this dream of being a pro athlete. And that dream's over at 31 for me, at least, so then I didn't have a second dream, I kind of had one dream. I didn't quite think about the next, as a youth athlete or even high school, college athlete. So put a lot of time into what that next step looks like and still figuring it out. I don't think it's ever anything that's an easy button, right? You try to navigate the waters and figure out what you're passionate about and find those avenues when they arise.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I mean, for me, I just got to kind of joke around, but I mean, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, the talent wasn't there. So now I do podcasts. I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's fast forward to, when you're at Indiana, was there any kind of, I guess, education on transition out of sport? I mean, you mentioned before, just kind of like, you wanted to dream to be the soccer player, but there wasn't necessarily that second dream. Do they have classes or programs? I mean, you're younger than me. I know when I was in school and running at University of Delaware, they didn't have that. But did they have that at IU when you were there?
Not that I remember. And now they might have more of those types of opportunities development-wise these days, but I don't recall that being a big part of the course development, whether that was through more traditional education or through something within the athletic department. I think that's something that can benefit a lot of people. I already mentioned like a lot of my identity was tied to sports. I was fortunate and was conscious, especially as I got older, to work on separating those two to a degree, but it's a really hard thing, I think, for athletes to do when athletics has been a big part of their life for 10, 20, 30 years, right? So making sure that athletes know that they can bring value to society and to their families and to their friends and to themselves in other ways outside of sports is really important. But I think that's certainly an area that needs to be focused on a little bit more. I think that it also, even not to backtrack into high school, but I think even at the high school ages, right? There's a lot of kids who have the dream that I had and then they don't get recruited or they don't have opportunities to play collegiately and their dreams are over, at 18. And that can be difficult as well. And I think sometimes you then see things spiral maybe when they're kind of getting out of high school into college and they're trying to navigate life a little bit maybe sooner compared to that college athlete who's able to at least do that when they're 22, right, 23 years old.
Yeah, that's such a great point because I mean, we, like you said, we kind of focus in on the college and professional athletes, but yeah, I mean, high school, you got the kid that's the star quarterback or the star running back or basketball player, soccer player. Everybody loves them, and all of a sudden, whether it's because they just might not be able to compete at the next level, or maybe they have an injury, which a lot of them happen. Then what do they do next? And I think with the education, it's so important. I remember talking to one guy way back on one of my podcasts, and he just said, Rob, I really wish there would have been like either a mandatory class or like a 6-week workshop that would have really gone through and taught about transition out of sport. And some of the things that we talk about is kind of bringing that back and going to an athletic department with resource partners, kind of like an Onrise, for example, and working with the athletic department to provide additional curriculum, not only for the current students, but also for the alumni athletes that tend to get forgotten. So now, again, they're out in the real world. And if they didn't have that education base on what to do next, it'd be great that they can tap back into their alma mater.
Yeah, 100%. I think getting back to one word I used earlier, which is like community, and that's another thing that you really lose when you transition out of sport. I think that's probably what I've missed the most, to be honest, is that community. Going into a locker room and seeing 20, 25 friends every morning, right? And just having the banter that exists in a locker room setting. You're at a similar stage of life, doing similar things with all of your teammates. And that's a lot of fun. And that community is amazing. And that's nearly impossible to replicate when you're outside of sports. And I think that's where that alumni group and so forth can really help during those transition phases and even after, with that sense of community as well. So
yeah, it's key, and it is something because they've associated with it, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but just athletes in general is that they've all gone through this journey of some sort, regardless of the sport, and to bring them back together. And we'll talk about that a little bit with community coming up here. So it's a good transition point of talking about networking, connecting, and especially the importance while you're still playing your sport. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, Hugh, I felt that firsthand. So towards the end of my playing career, really all 9 years, to be quite honest, like I didn't have multi-year contracts. I didn't make enough money where I knew that I could take several years to figure out what the next step would be. I knew that I needed to transition fairly smoothly. And by the time I retired, I was married, had 3 kids, house, etc. Right? I was full on into adulthood. I needed to figure that next step out. So I spent a lot of time throughout the 9 years, but definitely the last few, networking. And I always took the approach of trying to figure out what my next passion could be, and also trying to figure out what I didn't like to do. And I can share an example of that. Like I kind of wanted to get into sales, and I was kind of looking towards real estate, medical device, and software sales, right? Those were kind of the 3 that I was leaning towards. I ended up doing some shadowing with medical device, and I don't think I had the stomach for it, right? I'm seeing people getting operated on and so forth. And it's, I don't know if this is something I want to do every day for the next, 20, 30 years, So, hey, great. I explored it. I don't think that's my route. So then I pushed that to the side, started focusing more on real estate and software sales. And then real estate started looking at, is that commercial or is that residential? I don't think residential is for me because I don't want to give up nights and weekends with open houses and so forth. So, okay, let's look more at commercial. Did some job shadowing there and so forth. So that's the approach that I took. And that really helped. I ended up transitioning into software sales pretty easily. Took my first day on the job was a month after my last game that I played. Had a pretty smooth transition there. Getting back to one of the aspects of your question is the importance of doing it while you're playing. It's much easier to secure networking meetings with people when you're a current pro athlete or a current college athlete, right? Once you put the former in front of it, you're in this whole other big bucket of other people that used to be former college and pro athletes, right? So really important to start that process while you're still playing. That enabled opportunities for me to have conversations with athletic directors, leaders of Indiana Sports Corp here in Indianapolis, which is an amazing organization doing great things, bringing big sporting events to the city of Indianapolis, and many other people that I probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to engage with and network with had I not done it when I was still playing.
Yeah, and that's such great advice. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's important for athletes to understand, to try to do it while they're playing. I was talking to one agent And he just said that like a lot of the players, they just, they kind of got their nose to the grindstone. They're playing their sport and they don't take advantage of what you just said of networking while they're still playing. And then they get done and they just kind of expect, okay, well, I'm a former professional athlete and I'm just going to get that 6-figure job. And it might not be there because they didn't build those relationships ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's even harder if your ideal lifestyle is to then be out of sport, right? If you've been a college pro athlete and you want to be a coach, okay, that might be a little smoother for you in terms of taking that next step and having your resume built for that. Now, I semi-explored that option, but once again, I didn't want to move every couple years. I didn't want to give up all my weekends. I had traveled essentially every other week for 15 years, and I was just kind of ready to settle down, be with my family, support my kids, coach my kids. So I needed to get out of sport, right? So now I'm looking at, hey, I've kicked a ball around for a long time, and I think that has some attributes that can relate over to the real world. But when I'm applying for jobs at 31 years old, I am applying for jobs with other people that have real world experience. And on paper, I don't have that real world experience. So kind of leaning into those strengths as an athlete and kind of parlaying that into your next step is it's a tough thing to navigate. But the earlier you start, the better. The earlier you start and the clearer picture you have about what you're passionate about and what you want to do and connections you may have in that space is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess one thing I've been talking a lot about recently is just kind of cross networking, connecting with athletes from different sports. So a lot of times it seems like, especially at the professional level, where you might have the NFL players hanging out with the NFL players, Major League Baseball hanging out with Major League Baseball players. And obviously some of it's related to seasons and being different seasons. But what do you see there? Because I think there's a lot of value of just, you've all kind of had a similar experience growing up, just a different sport.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value in it. It's not always easy just because you're different seasons, different lifestyles. You can't really compare the MLS, for instance, to the NBA, right? There's just pay scales, lifestyles, everything is so drastically different. But I think there's a ton of value in that. I mean, there's the guy that lived across the hallway from me my freshman year at IU in the dorm rooms is now the head wrestling coach. So just like little things like that where there's that immediate kind of bonding and rapport that takes place, knowing that you've both kind of been in the grind, you've been through battles, you've had injuries, you've overcome them, you've dedicated yourself to a sport, and there's a real athlete to athlete connection that takes place. And I've seen that in a lot of different aspects. I see that a lot now in what we do at Onrise in terms of supporting athlete to athlete. But yeah, there's a lot of power behind that for sure.
Yeah, no, I highly encourage it. I mean, I do a monthly networking event for my podcast guests, and I've had the gamut of soccer players and baseball players, football players, handball players, MMA fighters. But it's just cool to see everybody in the room get together and with the commonality of, okay, how can we roll up our sleeves and help each other with our businesses? And they're just athletes across all different sports. So let's talk a little bit about alumni engagement. Obviously, Alumni Direct, that's something that's important to us. When you were at school, were alumni athletes across the different sports coming back, and not just for like the homecoming game, but to kind of work with the athletes, mentor them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I played soccer at Indiana University, and they do a really good job of engaging alumni. We try to make it back to as many games as we can. Now, there's not necessarily a formal kind of like mentorship program of sorts, but they create an opportunity to meet other alumni, meet current players, and sometimes things can kind of come to fruition out of that. Not a ton in terms of kind of cross-sport networking. I know they have some resources that they're trying to do, but I think it's just a little bit more difficult. So some success within each program, but in terms of like cross programs, I think it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and it's probably a lot of times I think it's generated by the coaches too. And what you see too is if there's a transition from coaches leaving or athletic directors leaving, it kind of, I guess that becomes somewhat of a challenge. But I think ultimately, for them to bring back alumni, I mean, I think alumni want to help, and if they bring them back in a mentoring capacity or any other capacity, just to work with the athletes, I think would be good. Is there from a professional soccer standpoint, like what kind of alumni engagement is there?
Yeah, good question. It's mainly done through the players' associations. So the league will do some things, but mainly through the PA. So the MLS Players Association will have annual gatherings. They'll have partnerships and help in that transition. I think they have a full-time person within the PA that helps with career transition. They'll do career spotlights and a career transition series. I was a part of that a couple of years back, where I was on a sales panel of individuals, who have transitioned into sales roles, and they did other topics as well, real estate, medical, and so forth. So yeah, mainly done through the players associations, the USLPA, which I helped co-found and still connected as an advisory board member and grievance committee member, do some things on that side of things as well. Now that's a newer players association, so they continue to have room to grow and will grow through monetarily and then through partnerships as well. But yeah, that career transition piece typically kind of falls on the players association side of things.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's I don't know if you got a chance to watch or listen to any of the episodes, but I got my couple quick questions. They're not hard, but if you were to go back in time, okay, we're gonna do a little back to the future action here. So we're gonna go back in time to IU as Brad as a freshman. What advice would you give to him? 10 words or less.
That's a good one. Network more is the first one that comes to mind for sure. So network more, be more involved. I wish I would have joined like the SAC committee and some things like that. I think those are aligned too, because that helps you then network. So yeah, being more involved and network more would be my two things that come to mind.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's so funny. When I ask that question, sometimes people like, okay, they're counting and like, oh, that's too many, or they just go on and on and on. So now, fast forward, what advice would you give to senior Brad? Again, 10 words or less.
Prepare for the pro life, I think would have been, hindsight, because I know that now that I played pro for 9 years, right, is kind of prepare for that lifestyle. So prepare for pro life and then dream bigger, I think might have been my two. And I'll clarify the dream bigger part. I think my goal was to be a pro soccer player. My goal wasn't necessarily to like make the World Cup roster, for instance, right? And not to say I would have done that if that was my goal and my end dream. That just happened to be my dream, to be a pro soccer player, right? And I was able to accomplish that. But I think there's a level of continuing to push the envelope, and dream bigger and, kind of break that large goal down into much smaller goals, which is what I did. But I think there's an opportunity to kind of push the limits and dream even a little bit bigger.
Okay, great. Let's talk about NIL, name, image, likeness, because I'm curious. It's obviously it's a big topic today in schools, even down to the high school level. Is that something that's kind of penetrating the world of soccer? Because obviously you hear about it from mostly football and basketball. What about from a soccer perspective?
It's there a little bit, not a big amount though. If you see some basketball players making over $1 million a year in the transfer portal and so forth, I think there's some athletes that can get 20, 30, 40K, something in and around there. If they're an elite soccer player, that might be part of a recruiting package, an NIL package. So yeah, it's part of it, which is exciting to see that impacting soccer and some opportunities that players have these days to kind of capitalize on their NIL, but not a massive part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because what we've seen is, we're trying to, and working with some different partners, is to bring maybe more opportunities for some of the different sports. Again, we talk about, again, like you said, the portal, and you talk about football and basketball players are the big ones that you hear about, but just, you've got a lot of local companies in the typical college markets that might want to do some advertising sponsorship and maybe tap into the soccer players, the swimmers, the runners, wrestlers, like just some of the non, tier sports, not the tier one sports. So it's, we'll see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I think college sports is a crazy time right now. I think everyone's trying to figure out rev share, NIL, transfer portal. I think my personal opinion, there needs to be some sort of kind of spending cap or limits, restrictions around NIL, and then rev share is brand new. So I think people are trying to figure that piece out. The transfer portal, I think that needs to be kind of reeled in a little bit. I don't think you can just transfer every year. You're a free agent. You take the highest money, you go there, you enter the portal again, you take the highest money, you go. I don't think that's what college sports should be. Now, not to say you have to stay somewhere for all 4 years. There has to be options and flexibility. So there's got to be some middle ground there that I think is probably a better path forward for college athletics.
Yeah, we were talking about I was talking to somebody the other day about that, and just basically saying maybe there's like a kind of like in baseball where, Major League Baseball, like you can't get drafted. You have to play 3 years in college if you started at Division I school. So maybe there's some kind of guardrails that get put in that you have to be at a school for at least a couple years. So that, because there's that whole talk about before the community and all that, I'm sure from a camaraderie and loyalty standpoint, as an athlete, you want your team to stay together, especially if you got aspirations of, being a winning team and ultimately, hopefully, a top-notch team.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it also comes down to just the development side of things, back in my day, as we say, is you can take a guy that has high potential because, I can redshirt him and then he'll get a lot better. Maybe he'll be raw freshman year, but sophomore year he'll be much better. And junior year, I think he'll be a heck of a player, right? Coaches can't really do that nowadays. They can't take a risk and take a roster spot on a project, right? So you're seeing big programs lean more heavily into the portal and older guys, and it's harder to get recruited out of high school directly to kind of like those blue bloods, right? You're more so hoping for the mid majors, do good, hit the portal, then work your way up. So it's impacting everything. And like I said, it's not all bad at all. I think there's a lot of good that's coming from it, but I think we need to put a little bit more guardrails on it to kind of keep it going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about your transition out of sport. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit more. Yeah, I guess, you kind of have two transitions. I'm not, you have the transition from being a college athlete to being a professional athlete. Maybe talk a little about that. But then ultimately, once you were done with your sport.
Yeah, I think college into pro, I think you can always do better with all transitions. I was fortunate in that Indiana men's soccer program is really treated like a professional program. The resources are there, the coaching is there, the environment is there, the competition, right? So I think in that aspect, that prepared me really well for life as a pro athlete. Now, I did pick up an injury the second half of my senior year, so I missed a big chunk of games. I missed the MLS Combine, still got drafted out to San Jose, but was still injured, battling with that injury. Ended up missing my rookie year due to that injury. So I had some ups and downs for sure, out my career. So that transition ended up being tough for me because of the injury. And I thought I was on the cusp of kind of realizing my dreams and signing a pro contract. And they were like, hey, you're dealing with some stuff. Go get healthy, come back when you're healthy, essentially. So the bright side of that, I was able to go back to IU. Doctors told me, don't work out 6 months, just shut it down. Don't work out. And I had already graduated because I graduated in 3.5 years because the MLS draft is in December. So I lived a better than normal, kind of college lifestyle for 4 to 6 months, which was a lot of fun. And then come the following year, earned a contract, and then my career was kind of off.
So you got to actually enjoy the college that you might not have been able to enjoy when you were playing because you had regimen in your everything you were doing.
Yeah, and I had no sports and no classes, so I was having fun for a little while.
That sounds like a good time. You got to do that for sure. And now let's talk about the transition. You played soccer your whole life. And now you played college, fortunate to play professionally for 9 years, and now you're going out in the real world. Talk a little about that transition for you.
Yeah, so my 9th pro year, a new coach came in, asked me to take a pay cut. Obviously, I didn't want to. Writing in my head, writing was on the wall. Hey, at the end of this year, I'm either not going to be asked to be back or I'm going to be asked to take another pay cut, neither of which I wanted to occur. So I was like, hey, I might as well just plan like this is my last year. Right? If it's not, great, I'll play another. But if it is, I'll be ready, So that last season for me, the 2018 season in the USL Championship, did a ton of networking, ton of meetings. I got my real estate license that season. So on road trips, I was studying for my real estate exam, took that, passed that. So now by the time that season was over, I had that in case I went the real estate route. I was doing job shadowing with medical device. I was applying and doing phone interviews and some in-person interviews in the software sales world. So I prepped a lot that year to try to make that transition a smooth one. Played my last pro game late October 2018 and started as a BDR, business development representative in a SaaS company on December 3rd. So about 5 weeks after, kind of kicking my last professional ball, so to speak, I was in it, 9 to 5 in a cubicle, learning the ins and outs of sales and business. And it was a fairly smooth transition in that regard. I've had a lot of teammates that have had a much harder time transitioning. Now, that wasn't to say it was easy, right? It was a big adjustment. I was used to being super active as a pro athlete and working 9 to 1 essentially. And now I'm there 8:30 to 5:30, those are long days and I'm inside the whole time. And so there was an adjustment in a lot of ways, adjusting to that lifestyle. But that's how I kind of handled that transition. I was fortunate enough, not to jump ahead, but was fortunate enough to see success in that role. Got a quick promotion after about 10 months into the account executive role, about a year after promotion into a manager role and then director role. So I've kind of done a good job kind of learning and adapting and growing, which is been rewarding to look back on. So now, however many years, 6 or so years into my sales career, I feel like I'm at a pretty good spot and comfortable with myself, comfortable with my skin, confident in my ability to grow companies and grow sales teams and make a big impact.
And that's great. I mean, that's what this is all about. I mean, it's just definitely inspiring to be able to take it to that next level, and other athletes seeing that there is that path. I mean, maybe give a couple words of advice to athletes as they transition out of sport, whether it's out of college or if they're fortunate to play professionally like you.
I'd say lean into your strengths. There will be people in the corporate setting that see what you have done as an athlete as a big value add. So lean into those strengths, whether that's the dedication, the hard work, the communication, your adaptability. There's a plethora of things that you can pull from. And hey, I've honed in on this skill the last X number of years, and this is how it applies to what I can do in this role in the corporate setting. So yeah, lean into your strengths, be confident in your ability. I think you will be better than you think you are. You will be better at this new role than you think you will be. It's just new, right? Change is tough, but lean into those strengths. You'll be just fine.
That's great advice. And then you kind of touched on it, but just real quickly, as in the position that you're in, and just in businesses in general, talk about the value that the athlete brings to a business. And because I think we've had the conversation like in career services and all that. We're like, oh well, you got nothing on your resume, you didn't do internships and all that. But I maintain, okay, well, your resume is you were an athlete. So talk about that, like, what would make employers want to hire athletes?
There's a ton of reasons. I mean, time management comes to mind, organizational skills, leadership, communication. One thing that I remember talking through during some of my kind of early on phone interviews is, hey, I had 7 head coaches out of 9 years professionally, moved multiple times. Like, I was adaptable, right? I can adapt to new situations. I'm a quick learner, new strategies, new formations as they come in, I can adapt and produce. And so there's a ton of things that you can lean into, but those couple come to mind, like adaptability. Anytime you dedicate yourself to something and have hard work and put the hours toward it and sacrifice for it, I think that shows a lot. And those same exact things that were once directed to sport can then be directed to a different role. So specifically within sales, at least for me, it was like the competitive side of things. I loved competing. I probably loved competing more than I loved the sport of soccer, to be honest. Like, soccer was just the mechanism in which I could compete. And so when I got into a sales role, it was, hey, how do I make sure I'm the top sales development rep at this company? How do I make sure that when account executive spot opens up, I am the first one to take that spot? How do I make sure that when I take that spot, I'm ready to go and I'm ready to be the top account executive, right? And so it's very competitive in a good kind of friendly competitive environment, right? Where you're, hey, I know where everyone sits and I know what everyone's doing, and I want to be at the top of that leaderboard within that role and be set ready for promotions. And how do I do good here to be ready for the next one? And so I really approached my sales career, especially early on, with that same competitive spirit of wanting to learn quickly and compete with not only others, but also myself.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. I mean, I was a runner in high school and college. A lot of times I was competing against myself, just just driven to get better, better times and stuff like that. But against obviously other teams as well. And I think that's sales definitely is something that's a lot of athletes gravitate to because of that, the goals and just being competitive and wanting to get to that next level. So let's talk about so after that you got into various sales positions as you mentioned. So let's fast forward to today and let's talk about Onrise and some of the great things that you're doing.
Yeah. So been at Onrise coming up on 2 years, and we're doing some really cool things in the athlete mental health space. So we work with pro teams, pro leagues, pro players associations, college athletic departments, programs, and youth clubs, high schools to support athlete mental health. And the really cool and unique thing that we do is we actually bring on, which is why I think we align so well, we bring on former college and pro athletes to be really engagement tools to drive engagement, reduce the stigma, make that first connection an easier one to make while still having licensed level of care as well. So if an athlete's struggling, they could see a peer support individual, a former college and pro athlete. They could see a therapist, psychiatrist, crisis care. We have nutrition, sports performance. So we really do a lot to either be that one-stop shop for today's athletes that need some help or to supplement existing resources. So in the example of a college athletic department, for instance, right, they probably have, it depends on the size of a division and all sorts of things, but they probably have a CAPS program or a counseling center within the university, right? But what can we do? Those people are typically overburdened. They have long hours and they need some help, right? So how can we supplement that by being that athlete to athlete support system, really relating to what today's athletes are going through, providing that diversity, scheduling flexibility and other things so that they can thrive on and off the field as an individual and as an athlete.
Yeah. And then so you're typically, so it's not, is it a platform also that they go to, or is it more about like the in-person at these different
Good
schools?
question. Yeah, it's a telehealth service. So there is a platform, but it's not tech heavy. It's really one-to-one care, right? So if an athlete's struggling, they want a little bit of an edge from a mental performance standpoint, or they're just feeling a little anxious, a little overwhelmed, or on the severe side of things, they're depressed or worse, right? We can be that one-stop shop regardless of what they're going through, right? They can connect with the former athlete. If they need licensed level of care, no problem. If they need psychiatric referrals, no problem. If it's a crisis in the middle of the night and they're going through something, we can be there for them. So it's really everything A to Z in terms of athlete mental health.
No, and that's great. And I would imagine that also sometimes they might not want to talk to the school counselor, or even if it's at a professional level, like somebody at the team level, might want to, whether it's more confidentiality or just in general, just feeling more comfortable, maybe not talking to somebody they know or that's specific. I mean, do you see a lot of that?
NCAA did a study, Rob, on that topic specifically, and the numbers shook out at about 50%. So about half of student athletes don't feel super comfortable leaning on the internal mental health resources within the athletic department or university. And that's no diss towards them, right? Those individuals. It's just the stigma around it, right? So our approach is, hey, how can we supplement the amazing people doing amazing work, boots on the ground, by providing another option, right? And what we can do is help catch those who fall through the cracks, help fill gaps that might exist, right? So in the example of maybe a smaller university that has one counselor, they're probably seeing athletes and non-athletes, and they could have upwards of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people that's their option, is that one individual, right? So they're overburdened. It takes weeks to get in and get scheduled with them. There's a lack of diversity because it's one person. There's a lack of scheduling flexibility because they work 9 to 5, but student athletes are typically not available 9 to 5. They're available 5 to 9, right? So there's a lot of just barriers built into that. And that's no slight towards athletic departments or universities. They're figuring things out. They're trying to provide resources and so forth. We feel like we can help really supplement that in a pretty cost-effective yet impactful way that really helps the athletes, once again, thrive both on and off the field and make sure that they have the support that they need. Because we also know, not to throw another stat at you, but we know athletes engage in mental health services less than standard populations within college. So it's 30 to 40% if they're not an athlete. If it's an athlete, it's about 10% of those who are struggling actually lean on those resources. I think in large part, that's because athletes are trained to keep pushing, keep going, push through it, right? If you think about you were a runner, right? Like, hey, pain in a way is good, right? Because next time I'll feel that pain later, or not as much because I've gotten stronger pushing through that pain, right? So that's how athletes are programmed for years and years and years. And what ends up happening is they apply that same logic to mental health sometimes. right? It's nothing. I'm fine. It's nothing. I'm fine. It's nothing. Now, oh shoot, there's a major breakdown that's occurring, and it's now a crisis. If we would have just kind of gotten to it a little bit more proactively, we would have avoided all that, right? So it's a little bit of, it's all of our fault in a way, but we got to provide awareness. We need to educate. We need to be there. We need to be proactive. So that's the approach that we take, and that's why our athlete to athlete really helps drive trust and building engagement with today's athletes.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like an awesome system, awesome company. So how can people find you?
On our website, they can reach out to me directly. Obviously, my name's Brad Ring. I'm on LinkedIn. Brad.ring. OnriseCare.com is the email address. If you're with a sports organization, we have a couple like kind of nonprofit partners that work in that space. So if you're kind of in and around that world and want to learn more, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. So reach out to Onrise, reach out to Brad. You can find us at alumnidirect.com on our Athletes and Entrepreneurs. The Alumni Journey podcast is on our YouTube channel, as well as across all different networks, Spotify and Apple and all that. Each week I kind of wrap up the podcast just saying there's so much great advice. There's a lot of athletes that are struggling out there and can really use some help. We really want to make an impact. So listening to Brad and some of the advice that he had in some of our other podcasts. So we encourage people to follow and listen to and watch the podcast. So this has been great, Brad. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. Had a fun time as well.
It's my pleasure.